saw a house on homepath.com. I ended up purchasing that home, winning that bid for about $9,100.
That's Darius Keller, an investor who turned Pontiac, Michigan's economic downturn into his personal success story, starting with major fixer-upper houses that he bought for under $10,000.
Instead of sitting in front of the TV moping and crying like everybody else, I'm about to go pick up some property for discount, you know?
In this episode, you'll learn how Darius started from nothing in 2014.
I knew nothing. Like, I didn't even know how to use a drill. But what happened is I was always nice to people, and I met an engineer.
How Darius creatively financed and scaled to 9 properties.
I had like 4 properties, and I pulled mortgages on 3 of them. So I ended up getting about $280,000+ cash.
And his advice for any investor who's starting with $10,000 or less.
So if you can find a house that has minimal repairs and you can put that small, like 3% down and make sure you get it inspected and stuff, I would go that route.
And now we're going to dig into all of that and more. I was thinking about any good story, particularly a real estate story. It's all, you have to know where somebody comes from. You got to know the market, the location. And I was looking up some details on the region of the country where you're from, in Pontiac, Michigan. And I was really interested looking at your market. And I was hoping you could kind of give me some insight from someone who's from there and who invests there. And one of the things that was really interesting, just from the outside looking in, Pontiac was one of those areas that was like boom town for a long time with the automobile industry, really big factories, really big economy. And then it looked like it had some tough times, all the way to the point where, the city government didn't have enough money and funding was an issue. But then it's come back, and now you have this incredible appreciation rates, prices are growing, and you've kind of been in the middle of that. So I thought maybe, can you just talk about Pontiac and talk about where you come from and what kind of this region in general? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so I'm from Pontiac, Michigan. I also invest here. And in 2014 is when I started investing in Pontiac. So like when I started, it was like the recovery phase. So we got hit real similar to like how Detroit was. We're 35 minutes out from Detroit, roughly. After 2014, maybe to about 2018 is when we started to see some kind of growth as far as value with the real estate. When I mean the real estate like bottomed out, it was like homes that were 150 grand, maybe even 200 grand, were now like $20,000, 30 grand. Like it was very similar to Detroit. We just didn't have as much blight, meaning boarded up homes and vandalism and stuff like that. As of today, beyond 2018, we now have Amazon, we have United Shore Mortgage. We have some other like Lee's Construction. We have some other big companies here who help kind of revive Pontiac.
And looking back at it, I mean, I always, when I'm looking at a real estate market, and I know all real estate investors think about like population, they think about the economy. For Pontiac and kind of greater Detroit, was it just a matter of like having to reshuffle industry, like the fact that the automobile industry changed and it just had to like downsize before it could upsize? Like, I'm just curious how, what it felt like to be, in that period,
Yeah. So we like earlier in 2014, between 2010 and 2014, we really didn't know, what exactly what it's going to take to recover the housing market. When you start seeing people walk away from their homes and stuff, that really disrupts the values. And what I thought what was good is what like the government, well, not the government, but the city council and stuff did is they started to board up and demo homes and sell some of the homes that are in the demo list, which those are homes that like I was actually attracted to for investing reasons. And what that does is when they demo those homes, it creates a big demand. So you're reducing supply and it creates a big demand. So when values start getting getting higher, that information becomes public. You start to get a rush of people to this city, and the demand curve starts to grow. And that's exactly what happened.
I think that's a good segue. So let's go to your story now. Can you take us to kind of where you were in your life at that point? Because you have an MBA, you're an engineer now. What were you doing at that point, and kind of what introduced you to the idea of buying some real estate?
Yeah, so in 2014, when I purchased my first home, that was around middle of the year, it was like June. I was just like any other college student, basically. I had a kid on the way. I was living with other people. I didn't really have a salary job. I had an hourly job making $10 an hour. When I was looking for a home, I just had the idea of like, wow, these homes are $10,000. Maybe I could purchase one and cut my costs down and be able to afford the student loan payments that I got coming in the future. Yeah. And that's actually what happened. I saw a house on homepath.com. It was starting bid was a 6,500, and it was like almost like a bidding type of war during that time. HomePath.com was a lot different than it was today, and I ended up purchasing that home, winning that bid for about $9,100, and I still live in it today. It's just a 3-bed, 1-bath colonial, old school style. But now that same street, those homes are, that was back in 2014. So those homes back then were, $5,000, maybe $10,000 range. And today they're about, the highest priced home that sold in the street was 175,000. So that gives you, a dramatic change. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out. I like to kind of nerd out on the like appreciation rates and looking at the history of markets. And I was looking at on Zillow at Pontiac since 2014 when you started to 2024. So we're like 10 years, right?
Right.
And it was like a 13.5% annualized appreciation rate over a 10-year period. I mean, I said and what I think is so incredible about that, and this is maybe we can speak a little bit more to just different markets, but you listen to bigger pockets, you listen to a lot of stuff at that point. People were downing on Detroit. People were like, no, you don't want to invest in Detroit, and this is where the old houses are, and people are bulldozing houses. It was the exact opposite. Like you should have been buying in Pontiac exactly at that time. So I don't know. It's kind of funny how that works, right?
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. When you're actually in there and you're actually buying the homes and you're actually dealing with appraisers and stuff from the outside who don't live in the city. Yeah. And they come and try to appraise those homes that you're buying. The issue that I ran into is that the values were spotty. So like you have one house on the block that's probably worth about $150,000, and then the other 10 houses on that block were maybe worth about $25,000. So it would make it really hard to appraise those homes. So sometimes it was like you could agree with somebody saying, oh, those homes are not worth it, But now it's fewer homes like that on those blocks. Yeah.
Right. So you recognize, and I'm curious your mindset at that point. That part of it sounds like, hey, I've got student debt. This is you recognize an opportunity, which shows me something about kind of your entrepreneurial instinct, I guess, is that, hey, this is an opportunity. But maybe can you speak to the fact that there's probably other people who are saying like, man, I don't want to buy right now. Like the market's tanking, everything looks bad. And you kind of thought the opposite. You're like, no, like I want to get in right now. Like what made you confident that this was a good opportunity to spend $10,000 on even at that point?
Well, just because I was living in it, I was able to save, cut costs down. But it wasn't until I got to my second home, I purchased that for $2,500 just 2 streets away, is when I got the idea of, hey, maybe I can make some money off of this thing,
Okay. Yeah. So it's like right now, this is a good residence opportunity. And I want to speak to, like, you did a bunch of work to those. So people are going to, even though that's a really low number, how much did you put into, you did a lot of the work yourself, but how much did you put in repairs? Like, so how much cost did you have in those properties after you spent $10,000 plus repairs, $2,500 plus repairs, just to give people an idea on that?
So because I was doing all the work myself, and I don't advise anybody to do that these days. It's a lot harder, especially with the increase in the materials and stuff. But I was spending about $25,000 on average for work. So they weren't like complete like they weren't like on the demo list where, you see homes in demos, the structure is completely damaged. They at least had good bones. So, but I was still putting in a roof, all new drywall, all new electrical, majority of the plumbing was being replaced, that kind of thing, siding. So 25,000. I just want to keep in mind here with the rents were low too. It wasn't just the values. The rent was around anywhere from $550 to $700 back in 2014. Okay. That rent today though, you can get 1,800, even 1,900, around that range for your property.
Got it. So at that point, if you're a pure investor, you might say, all right, I'm going to buy this for $10,000, put 25, maybe if you have to pay somebody to do the work, maybe you spend 30, 40, 50 grand and you'd have 60,000 in it. So you kind of be that 1% rule or something or so, somewhere in there, which would be a good cash flow play maybe. But then what's also happened is the market's come back in Pontiac. Do you have any stories about that point in your life where you're learning how to do all this stuff? Because I think some people, myself included, I'm not really handy myself. I hired out. I'm good at running the numbers, but man, to get in there and like fix electrical and plumbing and do all this stuff, do you have any good stories about how you actually did that?
Yeah, to make it clear, like when I started in 2014, I knew nothing. Like I didn't even know how to use a drill. But what happened is I was always nice to people, and I met an engineer. He was an investor too, young guy at the time, and I would just be a nice offering water and stuff because he was working on a distressed home just like myself in the neighborhood, and because he was an engineer, he was very handy and stuff and skilled. He said, hey, do you need help putting your furnace in and stuff? And from that point, he had helped me learn how to do electrical. Once you learn how to do electrical, really it's just the routing. The routing, carries over into like plumbing and gas because you get the skill to at least route the stuff properly. Um, and that's how I learned. Like the electrical really gave me a lot of confidence.
Do you think that's something like the average person? I mean, being an engineer, obviously you have some analytical skills, but I mean, do you recommend that? Do you think people should try to at least do a little bit of the trade? Maybe not all of it, but like, should they get their hands dirty on the first couple of deals to try to figure things out a little bit?
Yeah. The best way to learn is to buy a house that you have to completely redo. And it took me two homes to understand how the process really goes. Back then, the permitting wasn't near as strict as it is now. The permitting is a lot more strict now. So that was another thing too. I had to do things like read the building code book. I'm not a licensed builder at all. So me, reading that book, it helped me communicate to the people that need doing the work. So because sometimes I had to manage other people doing the work to make sure it gets done properly.
So you bought these first two properties and kind of light bulb comes on that, all right, I'm onto something here. Can you talk about the transition point from being like a person who buys, some houses to live in to like, oh, wait a minute, I'm an investor now and I'm going to do this more from there?
Yeah. So when I got to my third properties, when things got interesting because I started to dig into the financing more, just surfing the internet, YouTube, Bigger Pockets, stuff like that. That's where I picked up on a lot of the terms like equity and stuff. So I used a home equity term loan on my primary residence to purchase my third property from auction.com in roughly around 2016. And that property was listed it was listed for 10 grand on auction.com. And I had, I bid it up to 35,000 is what I won the property for. And the property was in a really good condition, very good condition. Again, remember the neighborhood, the values were like 50 grand roughly around that time on average. So they were still dramatically low. And this property was a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage. That same property today is probably worth about 170 grand. So you can kind of see the difference there.
The fact that you put those two houses together and did a lot of the work yourself, you could then recognize on this one, like, all right, this is a different animal. Like this one's not going to be quite as extensive, so I can bid it up some. And I'm curious how much did you took this home equity? It wasn't a line of credit. It was actually like a loan, like a mortgage loan.
Yeah, it was actually a 10-year loan. They were giving out a lot of incentives that time. I didn't pay any fees for the loan.
Okay.
The loan, I remember receiving $37,000 cash. So it was like 90% LTV loan because it was my primary residence I was taking the loan out on. So imagine it's a 10-year loan.
Right.
But once I got that property, I ended up taking another loan out. And that's when I did like the 30-year cash refinance.
Got it.
But again, during that time, you got to remember when the values are low, and we're getting through that recovery phase. It was really hard to get pre-approved for financing. Where today, I mean, it's a lot easier to get pre-approved for financing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. A lot of banks, if you start, I don't know if you ran into this, like if you get below 50 grand, there's some, whatever the number is, like it's like you cut off a lot of the options on what banks will even loan you money. Like, yeah, 30 grand, 40 grand, they're like, we're not interested. So you probably, I bet you ran into that too. And what I think is so interesting is that when you first start, like when anybody first starts, man, you got to be scrappy to get the money to do anything. And so number one, you used your equity in the very first house you bought, you leveraged that to then buy another asset that is going to produce income. But I'm also curious, I think I remember you saying in maybe another interview or something else, where on that first property, even to get the materials for that first property, I mean, you bought it for 10 grand and then you had to like put 25 grand in it. Like, did you use like some Home Depot credit cards or some other stuff to do that part of it?
Yeah. I mean, they still have it today. Honestly, I still use it today. It's like a promotional thing with Home Depot. It's like, don't quote me on it, but I think it's around $2,000 you spend. It's like 24 months, no interest. And I mean, that really helped me a lot because I would go to Home Depot and I'd buy all my materials I would need for the house. And then I didn't have to pay no interest for like those 24 months. And to say my materials cost me 9 grand, it was over. There was no shopping. There was no running back and forth. So all I had to do was get the materials and work, and that really helped.
Yeah, so smart. Yeah, it's like thinking outside the box. It's saying, all right, Home Depot, the local credit union, the bank. I mean, when your first deal or two, you just got to figure it out. And what's so cool in your first deal or two, you got this equity. You now buy the third property. Like, did you kind of use that formula again? Like, so how did you kind of, because now you have 9 properties. Like, what was the recipe from there? Did you shift it up, or did you do just kind of the same thing?
Yeah. So because you said 9, I can explain exactly how I was able to grow it so quickly. So I was sitting down watching YouTube one day, and I heard Ben Matlis say multiple refinances, and honestly, when I heard him say that, a light bulb hit. And what I did is I had like 4 properties, and I pulled mortgages on 3 of them really quick, like within the same year. Then I also use a cash signature loan as well. So I ended up getting about $280,000+ cash. So I was already on my 5th property. So I ended up selling one, and then I bought 4 more that like all in the same year. So that really helped my portfolio out. And like 2 of the properties didn't even need much work at all. So the city I went to was Flint. And in Flint, at that time, this was like August of 2021. I bought a fully remodeled house for like $35,000. Okay. And the reason why I mentioned the date there is because if you remember, we had that thing. We had we had a water crisis out there, but we also had the national eviction ban. So I was like, instead of sitting in front of the TV moping and crying like everybody else, what I did was I was like, oh man, this is the second time they shouted that eviction ban too during that time. Yeah. I was like, I'm about to go pick up some property for discount,
Yes. Everybody else is complaining. That's the time. It's like Warren Buffett says that. It's like, if there's blood in the streets, that's when I'm buying, or something like that,
Yeah. You be fearful. What is it? It's be fearful when everyone's greedy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be greedy when everyone's fearful.
You got it.
Yeah. Absolutely. You got to do the opposite. So you've been doing the opposite from the very beginning. When people were fearful early on in Pontiac, you're like, all right, nope, I'm in. And now in Flint, you're doing the same. You saw kind of a similar opportunity.
Yeah, but in Flint, it's crazy because after I went out there, GM dropped almost $1 billion they dropped like 500 million in Flint roughly. So, and then another city outside of Flint, they dropped another 250 million in electric vehicle plants. So that was really helpful. So I'm starting to see growth in the market from that kind of stuff. The rents haven't jumped significantly yet out there because they do have an income problem and a population issue. The population is still not up to par, and the job market out there is not the greatest.
Got it. So the supply demand, whereas in Pontiac you've had kind of supply got eaten up. There's a demand for properties, and then the rents and prices have gone up. Not quite as much in Flint, but the big story for you personally, though, which I want to go back to, is you kind of built. It sounds like you had a foundation of those first 4 or 5 properties. You've got equity, you've got income. Some of that is because you did value add and you just improved the value. Some of that's because it's appreciated over time. But then you harvested that equity and said, all right, I'm going to build on that foundation, go buy another 4 properties or 5 properties. And now you got something, you kind of almost doubled your output because of that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Were there any, nervousness about getting bigger at that point? And what I'm thinking about in particular is, you've got tenants, you got operations, you got maintenance now, like you also have a job, full-time job. Like, were you spend a lot of time on this, I guess is my first question. Like how much time did you have to spend managing the properties, fixing them up? Because some people might be thinking, well, yeah, if you got a lot of time, you can do this, but what if you have a full-time job? So you had a job too. So maybe speak to as you're growing and doing all this, like what does your day-to-day schedule look like?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. There's a lot of people I help coach that are starting out, and a lot of people like to do things halfway. So when you're first starting out, and when I did it, all my homes were remodeled. So those like first 4 homes were fully remodeled. So when I put the tenant in, I never had to really go back and fix up the property, Now I'm still being conservative on the repairs. These properties don't have granite countertops and stuff, They're very they're affordable housing. And the theory was that, okay, if I get too many homes and I have to go back to fix stuff, that's when I'm going to fail. And I also saw that too with some people that I know. They they got in a lot of trouble because they bought too many homes that they couldn't fix up. So where I took like a slower approach, which made sense because I was restoring the value of the properties as I'm fixing them up and buying them.
Yeah, it's like some people, they do a kind of a mirage. Like they buy a bunch of properties and they kind of put some sugar coating on it. But what you actually did is, I mean, you were fixing the guts of these properties, like the foundations, the plumbing, the electrical. So so when we go back to your time, like a lot of the time and things that people do when they have to manage the properties is they get a call in the middle of the night because some issue on a 80-year-old plumbing job that's busting in the middle of the night. Whereas you knew the whole property, you knew you'd fixed it up, so. That made a big difference, I guess, on your maintenance and your management.
Yeah, and I only spend maybe about 5 hours a month on the properties. I don't spend much time at all. 1 hour, making sure like bills and stuff are paid. The other 4 hours are usually just dealing with tenants, questions, travel time. Going and checking on properties too, because I like to at least drive by, the properties every few months.
Well, that brings me to the management. Like, do you have a profile or like the type of tenant? It sounds like you've had some good tenants. Like, who's your ideal tenant? Like, is it somebody who stays for 5 years, 10 years? Is it somebody who works locally? Do you do Section 8? I'm just curious, like who your customers are.
Yeah, so I don't do any Section 8. My average stay is usually around 4 or 5 years. What I find out is tenants like they like the single family the residents, and I don't increase rent. So I increase rent, but conservatively, put it that way. Right. So that gives them an incentive to also stay longer. So let's say your neighborhood rent is $1,300 a month. Okay. That's the average across the board. What I try to do is try to get $200 to $300 more than that, above that $1,300. So I would come into the neighborhood and I'm already, my math and everything is adjusted for $1,600 rent. And that really helps me out when I go to refinance the properties. Because if you remember what I said I refinance multiple properties at once. You have to go through a pre-approval process to get all those loans. Right. And because my rent is a lot higher than the average rent in the neighborhood, just by that $200 to $300, that helps balance out my debt to income ratio quite a bit. Many of my tenants, we all had to deal with the COVID thing. I didn't go through the same stress that everybody else did as far as tenants not paying and stuff, because my tenants have commodity jobs like plumbing, roofers, carpenters. Many of my tenants are not working at grocery stores and stuff, so they have really good incomes.
It's like skilled blue collar kind of jobs that they're out working and they got demand. Their skills are in demand, essentially.
Exactly.
What do you do? I'm curious because like when we rent a house, that's our product essentially. And so you said like the average rent in the neighborhood might be $1,300 for all the houses. How do you get that? How do you position your property so that it warrants and you actually get people wanting to pay you $1,600 instead of the $1,300?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is open house. I don't see the open house signs up as much. I promote the open house through like Facebook. Also, Zillow, you can put it in the description there that you are having an open house, and that helps. And I go through the application process. I have a 2-step application process. One time I had over 100 people apply to a property. I don't do an application fee just so I can get more applicants in. And my first step in my application process is just a preliminary step, just so I can filter out really quickly many applications at once. And then I go to a more thorough step, which is my second step of the application process.
Got it. So you're just kind of getting the tire kickers in that first step, or people who they don't have enough income, it doesn't qualify on income, or they don't have a job history or something. You're like, all right, it's not going to work. Let's not spend your money on application yet, until you can qualify for the first step.
Yeah.
Got it. But even then, like, so what I'm guessing, kind of reading between the lines, is you fixing these houses up really nicely. Is the fact that you can get 1,600 and have 70 applications or 100 applications, that they look at your house, they're like, this is better than the competition. Like, this house is like done better. It's at a better location. Are you picking better lots? I'm just like, what is it that you're doing that's better maybe than the competition out there?
Right. I would say two things. So I also get help as well. So I also put my marketing material in Spanish, and that really increases my reach. I have somebody there who's speaking English and Spanish as well. That's That's a big difference. In photos, my background's in like graphic design and stuff, as well as the engineering, and I do make sure that we do like good photos. Just having a clean property and presenting that, it can go a long way.
Love it. Yeah. So marketing, it's packaging,
Yeah.
putting your property in its best light. So cool. So it sounds like you have a good system. It seems like every landlord I meet who has a good tenant screening system has some stories that, like, some scars to prove it, like they got them there. So do you have any negative stories of like evictions or times when it didn't work out where you're like, all right, I've learned how this game works now?
Yeah. I had a tenant. They decided to just walk out the house, like literally, just like leave the house and leave me with, all of their belongings, toys, food in the fridge. I mean, if you just imagine a full family just walking out and leaving you the whole house, that's essentially what happened. I wouldn't say it was a horror story, because you could have a bigger issues than that. But you got to imagine, I lost thousands of dollars because it takes time to clean it out. Um, Many of the stuff there was some stuff missing, right? And then fire alarms and things like that had to be relooked at. I also was going through the eviction process during that time, so they left in the middle of the eviction process, which I had already paid an attorney as well. So that attorney cost, that was out of my pocket as well. So I would say turnover is when I lose the most money.
Yeah.
That's usually, I'm saying the average maybe $3,500 during turnover time,
Yep.
and that's because it's usually the turnover is not good. It's eviction, a 7-day notice, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a wake. I've had the same wake up call. Like when you have a turnover, this a negative turnover. Not only do you have to clean up and you have to paint the walls, you got to maybe replace some flooring. Then you got legal costs. I mean, it's such an expensive thing that it really has humbled me to say, all right, I want to keep my tenants like long. It's a win-win if we can all stay happy and keep them
Yeah,
in the house.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you. So here you are, like I kind of we've gone kind of from the beginning of the story. You got that first house. You have these 9 properties. You're working full time job. Like, what's your life? What do things look like now? Like, are you still trying to acquire more? Are you taking a break? Like, what's 2024 look like for you? And what are you seeing out there in your market?
yeah. So what I'm trying to, like, okay, once you start making a certain amount of money, um, getting like an extra $1,000 or so a month in rent, it really doesn't cut it. So I'm trying to really make a leap financially, and the way I'm doing that now is I'm taking equity out of properties, and I'm putting it into stocks.
Hmm.
So these are hyper growth stocks. I know you heard of AI.
Oh yeah,
I'm a big believer in AI. So I'm pumping thousands of dollars in those kind of stocks right now.
got it. So you're diversifying. You've got your long term properties, your rentals, and with long term mortgages on them, and then you're also using some of your wealth to kind of diversify into some other equities and that other stuff.
But because I'm using the, like I said, hyper growth stocks, what I'm doing is my plan is to leverage that money that I make from that, and maybe put some money from the real estate and try to buy something a lot bigger, maybe an apartment building. But I want to do it without a partner. First I want to try to buy, a 30 unit property without the assistance from another person. So I would, go to the bank, get the financing myself, use the cash that I have to do that.
I like it. I like the. I'm really impressed by just the deliberate pace that you go at, Darius. Like it's like you make these big leaps, but you do it. Sounds like you do it really carefully and thoughtfully, and you've grown at the pace that works for you. Like you take a big step, you buy 4 or 5 properties, but it took you 2 years to remodel the first one. I mean, so I really like the pace that you're moving.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so I guess that would bring me to a final question: is let's say somebody is kind of in the same situation you were, 2014. I know a lot of people listening to this. Some people will be intermediate, advanced investors, but there's also people who are brand new who are like, all right, I've got a few $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, and I want to do in 2024. I want to start buying a rental property, or I want to start building wealth, and I'm starting from scratch. Like, do you have any feedback, both maybe from a mindset standpoint, but also just practically how a person who's getting started now can think about how to get in the game?
Yes, yes. So if I only had like $10,000 or so, what I would do is I would try to, go the FHA route, buy something that you can keep everything in the same loan, because I see that's where most people I see fail, is when they buy a property and they with a mortgage, and they have to go out and get a personal loan to fix the roof, and then and they have to go get a private equity to fix the plumbing. So if you can find a house that has minimal repairs and you can put that small, like 3% down and make sure you get it inspected and stuff, I would go that route. That way, even though you may be making a small, say if you get an FHA loan, you live in it or whatever, you pass the, probation period to live in it, and then before you turn it into a rental, what I would do is I would go for a smaller profit instead of taking that big leap, trying to go for a bigger profit, like buying a house that needs a full remodel.
Yep. Kind of going the opposite of what you did.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
you got to be careful now because it's so much easier to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. So somebody has 10,000 down or a number like that, they can go move into a property, buy a house, buy a duplex, buy a house hack essentially, get that smaller down payment, but not try to buy get a base hit. Don't try to get like a home run on your first deal and just learn. You're going to learn a lot anyway, right? So
Yeah.
Get that first deal. I like that advice. That's really good. So thank you for being here, Darius. It's been awesome talking to you. I want to give you a chance. You're out there on the internet. You're helping people. So I'm going to put all the links to everything that you say in the show notes and the podcast description, but let people know where they can hang out with you and what you got going on.
The easiest way to contact me is through Instagram. At Darius_one of one, and you just spell one of one out. So ONE of ONE. And then a second place to reach me is through my website, rewithd.com. There, if you can schedule a face-to-face call with me, that's still active. Also, too, if you don't feel like doing that, you can send me a quick message on Instagram, and I'll reply back to you. You can also go to Real Estate with Darius on Facebook and YouTube as well. But I'm pretty active. If somebody asks me something, many times I'll just answer it right on video.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed your Instagram channel. You have a lot of good responses and quick answers to questions. So you're doing good work. I really appreciate everything you're doing, Darius, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.
In this episode, we talked about a tenant eviction and turnover that cost Darius a lot of money. But what we didn't talk about was how you actually avoid that by screening and picking the best tenants for your rental property. If you can figure out this tenant screening skill, everything else as a landlord becomes a lot easier. So in my next video, I talk with tenant screening expert Pam Storm about how to find the best tenants for your rental property. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click the thumbnail above me, or you can click on the link in the podcast or YouTube description below. I'll see you in the next episode.